Hey everybody, long time no see. How's everybody doing on wearing my headset today so I don't wear my throat out? Good morning. Wow, you're up early in the morning there in New York City. We're going to go over some interesting things today, but I just want to make sure that there are people here before I start talking. So why doesn't everybody just kind of say hello? That way I know that people can hear me okay and that the video is not lagging. So your feedback over in the comments section would be really good. I don't want to start the presentation until there's, say, a good, say 15 or 20 people here, but let's hear some feedback and see some people commenting on how the video is at first, just so I'll know if everybody can hear me okay or if it's a bit choppy. Great. How is the video sync? Is it okay or is it a little choppy for everybody? Good. That's good to know. All right, I'm going to take a drink because my throat is a bit raw today. Great. And I'm not going to get started yet. Have my handies ready. Maybe I'll lay a couple out here on the table. Ready to go. I don't want to get going on this until I have a gear because otherwise I'll just end up repeating the same things over and over again. So if anybody, while we're just kind of waiting for a few more people to get here, if anybody has questions until we get a few more people here, then I'm happy to accept those. Please, no questions about your own chart though. And just so you know, what I'm going to do just briefly, and I'll repeat this, is I'm going to go over the nodal axis in the Shastiamsa chart and equally explain why it's so important to have your birth time rectified, especially if you're working with the system that I'm using in order to do this. And we'll show those things here in just a little bit. That is a long subject in and of itself, Fernando Rawl. It would take a long time for me to tell you how to rectify the D60. Basically, it's a technique involving transits, and you check for factors from the D60, transiting the Arashi chart, but it's a bit more complex than that. Okay. So I'm going to put a throat lozenge in my mouth, and if people hear it rattling around, please pardon me. I just really can't help it because my throat's raw. So it happens that way. Let's see if a few more show up before I get going on things. And if not, I'll give like another minute or two that we've got here, then we'll get going with the amount of people that we have. But of you who show up late, you'll have to go back and watch the beginning, but you're not here anyway. So what difference does it make for me to say it? Is rectify it? No, but it helps. You can generally trust planetary positions in terms of what I am going to. Some of you are asking too many questions and you're kind of taking all my thunder away from me yet. I haven't gotten into the things I'm going to talk about. But in terms of the role of the nodal axis in the D60, then I'm going to go over that just a little bit. In terms of if it's imperative to rectify it, no, but all you'd really be able to do is to look at the planetary positions from each other. You wouldn't be able to work with any houses. Okay. What is rectifying in general? There are several different rectification techniques. Okay. I don't rectify with people in person because the techniques I use can sometimes take me several hours. So, okay. All right, so I tell you what, let's give one more minute for people to show up, and then we will get going on things. And let me just make sure I can share the screen with you. You won't be looking at my face quite as much. Looking at charts, and I'll try to set it up because I know that tend to like both South Indian and North Indian. Can bring both of those up on the screen for us to look at. One more minute. We've only got like a small hand. I'd like to have a lot more people here, but you know what? Rather than waiting for them, probably be good to just get going, and they can catch up on what they missed from the beginning. And I tell you what, we're going to go into it. So before I bring up a chart on the screen, I do a lot of work with house cusps for many specific reasons. House cusps will give you a lot more detail to your consultation and your interpretation. In terms of working with house cusps, we're not doing it in the way that it's done in Western astrology. Whereas if you have the 9th cusp, say in Sagittarius, and you've got the 10th cusp in Capricorn, we're not saying that the area between the 9th and the 10th is the 9th house. Instead, we would say the 9th cusp is conjuncting Sagittarius. You have a point, a degree point in Sagittarius that marks the 9th house cusp. It's just a degree point, much like a planet being in a sign. Or you have the 10th house cusp as a degree point in Capricorn. So that's how we're working with it. What's good about house cusps too is if oriented. You can use house cusp nakshatras, and I did a video on that. So what I'm thinking about doing is doing a video axis today showing you how I do karmic analysis that I do, just to give you a general idea. But equally, we may do some follow-up videos on this with the Rahu, with Rahu and Ketu. Sorry, I keep looking at people's comments and then getting distracted. We may do some follow-up videos with the nodal axis in the Arashi chart, continuing on from this too. But if you can imagine, you've got these specific degree points. And if you understand what a divisional chart is in general, what it does is it takes a zodiac sign and it cuts it into a certain number of equal portions. So if you've got the Navamsha, for instance, that's going to cut a zodiac sign into 9 equal portions and put planets in specific places based on what portion they happen to fall in. So, you know, the Navamsha, that's 9 equal portions. Now imagine when you get up to the Shastiamsa, which is 60 equal portions, right? So basically it cuts a zodiac sign into basically 60 equal portions of 30 minutes each. So if your birth time is even slightly off with that Shastiamsa, the house cusps are going to be different. Now you can do this particular show today without using house cusps or with house too, but you'll get a lot more depth and accuracy if you. The reason it's important to rectify, this is just a brief part of the presentation. It's so important to rectify is because those house cusps are different positions. If your birth time is, say, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes off, even if you're talking about the Navamsha, or if you're talking about the Dwadashamsha, or any other divisional chart, sometimes a discrepancy of a minute or two can really change those charts drastically. Okay, and even if you're using equal house and no house cusps whatsoever, it's still best to rectify, because then you know that what you're looking at is going to be exact. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a particular example. If I can go into the screen and bring up a chart for us. Just bear with me for a moment. Okay. Okay. Who is seeing the chart on the screen? I'm not going to start talking, see the chart. Okay, so please give some feedback to the chart, or I don't see the chart. That would be most helpful. And I'm just going to wait until somebody types it in the window, even though I know there's a bit of a lag between when you type things and it actually appears. Okay, so if you can see the chart, please let me know. Great, you can see it. Here's another question for you. I now have a Word document open as well. Can you see the Word document? Type in, yes, I can see the Word document, or no, I can't see the Word document. That would be helpful to me. So I'm just going to wait a minute or two until somebody types that in and says, I do not see the word document, or I do see the word document. Okay, so please let me know one way or the other, somebody out there, right? Somebody, no word document, excellent, good, because that's my notes and I need to keep that open. All right. Okay, so good. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into our document here. I know everybody likes this north-south screen, so we'll do that. That way, if you at the northern version, that if you like looking at the southern version of the chart, you can do that too. Preference is to the northern version of the chart. So if you look at this particular chart, what I am to give you an idea of rectification. So you see these blue numbers that are in each of the signs. Those are the house cusps. So if you'll look, you'll notice that here in Gemini, which is the 9th equal house, you have the 6th and the 11th house cusps. And here in Aries, which is the 7th equal house, you have the 3rd and the 7th cusps. Now watch what happens when I adjust the birth time. Maybe just even 1 minute. Okay, let's see. Right, you'll notice that all of a sudden you have over here in Aries, you no longer have the 3rd and the 7th, you have the 3rd and the 4th. That's how big of a difference a minute's worth of birth time can make in the Shastiamsa chart. Okay, so rectification is very important. If you'd like your birth time rectified, that is a service I also offer through my website at AuthenticAstrology.com. You can go and the website and we can set something up. I don't have it listed as a service on my site because I have to assess the fee based on what the birth time is. So I like to handle it on an individual basis. Okay, before I get going into the Shastiamsa bit, I'm just going to see if we have any other questions here. Okay, no other questions over here. So let's get going on our Shastiamsa presentation. One of the really wonderful things that you can do through astrology, dependent upon how in-depth you want to go with things, right? You can look at house cusp nakshatras. I'm going to try to bring this up on my screen. You may or may not see it because it doesn't always show pop-up windows. Okay, if you see it, that's great. And you'll see all sorts of things like the number 1 with a point and Mrigashira next to it. Next to all these other Vargas here, if you're able to see this, all the way down to Varga 60, you'll see some words. These are the Varga deities. That are the Varga deities of the house cusps. You can incorporate those into your consultation too. So one of the things I will share with you is I have a specific system for working with this. What I would suggest is don't necessarily just try this at home on you or somebody else's, because unless ways of determining it, you're going to find that some things a little bit different or a little bit off. If you just want to look, general interpretation and to give you some ideas of some thoughts or some impressions, sure, then go ahead and do that. But if you want to get a little bit more exactitude, you need to know ways of judging the planets, judging the strengths of the planets, because that all ties into the interpretation of the Varga deities, as well as to the interpretation of the nakshatras, which I use both of those in this particular instance, okay? Before I get going into that, what I like to do in my karmic analysis is I like to look at Ketu and Rahu in the Shastiamsa chart. So why the Shastiamsa chart? Well, we can understand that we look at the Shastiamsa chart for confirmation of everything. It sets the ceiling for all the other Varga charts. So it's a very important chart. But what is one of the reasons that it sets the ceiling for it? Well, in my opinion, and I know a lot of people say, look at the Shastiamsa for previous lifetimes, and you can do that at the nodal axis. But what the Shastiamsa chart does is more deeply seated karma. Seated, that's TED, more deeply rooted karma that the individual has. This is karma that goes back several lifetimes. And it's the thing that the individual feels deep within them, but maybe doesn't really understand why they behave in these ways, right? And it's good to understand it because it helps you to clarify what you really need to work on in this particular lifetime, right? So I like to look at the sign that Ketu's in. I like to look at the nakshatra that it's in. I like to look at the planet that rules the nakshatra and its well-being. I like to look at Ketu's Lord and its well-being. I like to look at the Shastiamsa deities of those planets as well. I like to look at the houses that Ketu's Lord is in from Ketu itself, such as in the 10th here, and what house it's in from the ascendant, which would be the 7th. I like doing the same with Rahu. In terms of all those things I just mentioned, I'm going to kind of speed it up a little bit here so I can make sure we fit everything in today. So in other words, with looking at Rahu's Lord, such as Saturn, I like deity, which is Purishaka. I like looking at Shatra that Rahu's in, which is Ashlesha. I like looking at Shastiamsa deity of Rahu's Nakshatra Lord, and that's I like looking at the well-being of Mercury. I like looking at the position of Saturn from Rahu itself, and I like looking at the position of Saturn from the ascendant itself, and the house Cusps nakshatras connected to that, and the well-being and Shastiamsa deities of all of those lords. By the time you do that, you have all this technical mumbo jumbo that's can fill up pages, so to speak, right? So by the time you do that, you have some very intensive information. And I usually open up a Word document and kind of put it all down so that I can go back and read through it and interpret it in that particular manner because it's helpful. So what are we looking at with this? Are we looking at an actual previous lifetime? More than likely, we're looking at the karma from several lifetimes that's pulled together. That's what my experience has been. Quite often when I do this for people, I get interrupted and they go, but I still feel that. And of course you would, because your karmic makeup is still a part of your being, right? So really what we're looking at is karma. That's the more important thing to understand. Whether it's one time, several previous lifetimes, whatever it might be, whether it's no life, it's a story of your karma. The important thing is that it's a story of your understanding. That story really helps you to work on that particular. Okay, so if we look at this in general, one of the things we'll see here is that, oh, and I forgot to mention a step. Another thing I like to do, and I'll bring it up over here, is I like to bring up the Arashi chart. And I like to see where the 12th cusp is, because the 12th is the past. And so that'll help. And I like to see what sign in the Rashi chart that 12th cusp is in. And I like looking at that planet in the Shastiamsa. So that's Mars. Okay. So the 12th cusp here is in Revati Nakshatra. And the 12th cusp Shastiamsa deity is Haramba. Okay. And here we see Mars in a Karaladamstra, Shastiamsa, okay? And basically we want to look at Rashi aspects and planets that are conjuncting, right? But what this is, when we look at this here, let me move my Word document over here. I can take a look at it while I'm doing this. So Mars here is conjunct Ketu, right? And basically you've got Ketu and Moon is in a Yaksha, Shastiamsa deity. So that helps us to understand that. Ketu is in an Hindu, Shastiamsa. So when we begin to interpret this, understanding that that 12th cusp is in a Haramba, Shastiamsa. Well, Haramba is a form of Ganesha who protects the weak. But the problem is the 12th cusp is in Revati Nakshatra, and there's somewhat of a compromised Mercury. So this individual in a previous lifetime, because Ketu is in Cancer, they had like some deep emotional concerns due to a great level of sensitivity that they had, because we can see Ketu here is in Shravana Nakshatra. These deep emotional concerns made them feel, really upset with life. They may have found themselves in positions where they worried about other people, whereas in actuality, on one level, they were really worried about themselves. Probably a mixture of both of those things. But Ketu in Cancer has this tendency to take its emotional worries and its big concerns and project it onto others, and even to blame other people for one's emotional things were probably a part of the scenario within this particular. So more than likely, from some of the factors that we're going to see today, this individual was in a position where they likely cared for other people and were likely concerned about other people and felt that they needed to protect some other people in their life. That was what they felt their duty was. I have to protect somebody. Okay? When we look at that, the Lord of the 12th here is Mars, which is Karala Damstra. And we've got a debilitated Mars, so it's not very strong. Karala Damstra is kind of loosely interpreted as cleaving fang, but another word of it means fearfully toothed. And the way I've seen this particular Shastiamsa work itself out in certain scenarios is the individual either says something very powerful to somebody else, or they're afraid to speak something. So in this particular scenario, we see that this individual likely cared for somebody else and they were concerned for somebody else. But they were to say something that would have been very in terms of protecting the other individual or other individuals, because fearfully toothed, they were afraid of speaking. The brashta. Brashta means, kind of fallen, or fallen from one's path, or going against one's path, so to speak, which is the same thing as sin. So this person was placed in a position of protecting others, but they went against their path, right? Ketu Mars quite often dreams up these heroic scenarios that they would like to enact, right? I feel I need to do this. I feel I have to protect these other people. Pardon me, but quite often they have a hard time actually fulfilling that particular position, right? So the Lord of Shravana Nakshatra, which is where Ketu is at, is Yaksha. Now, Yakshas are like nature spirits on a certain level. Quite often I've seen this play itself out in terms of people who are guardians of nature or who want to protect the earth. So this individual was in a position where they were likely protecting land or protecting the earth, and equally had discharged to them the duty of taking care of somebody else, but they didn't have the responsibility. Why? Because they were afraid of saying something. So let's look at this a little more deeply. I'll see quick questions popping up. Okay. The 12th is not Mercury. The Lord of the 12th from the Rashi chart is 12th, and the Rashi chart is in Aries. All right. Okay. So the Lord of the 12th is not Mercury. Oh, when I said the Lord, I see what you're saying. The Lord of the 12th, because the 12th cusp is in Revati Nakshatra. I'm looking at the house cusp Nakshatra. So the Lord of the 12th house cusp Nakshatra is Revati. That's what I was voicing with that, just so you understand. Okay, so equally, we seeing Ketu in Hindu Shastiamsa. One of the things that is associated with that, quite often Hindu Shastiamshas want to protect those closest to them. That's one way of looking at it, but they also have a very strong, very powerful imagination. So they can imagine fears, especially with Ketu being in Cancer here. There would have been the imagination of certain fears and projecting those fears onto other people. Mixed in with that, because the Rashi Lord and the Nakshatra Lord of Ketu is, sorry, just looking at a couple of things. itself in its own nakshatra, because that's the moon, and it's in Hasta, there would have been the desire to try to exercise over the situation in terms of trying to protect the other person's fact of speaking something that might have actually helped the other person. They then tried to seize control or appear strong within this particular instance, right? Ketu here is conjunct the 10th. They were afraid that if they spoke, they would have had their, for lack of a better way to put it, there could have been the potential for their world to collapse around them. Okay, we see this 10th cusp is in Dhanishta Nakshatra, which is ruled by Mars, which is again Karala Damstra, right? So desired to protect, but could never really bring themselves to do it because they were afraid that if they were to enact that their world would have kind of come tumbling down around them. Okay. Ketu's Lord, the moon, is in the 10th, so that furthers that. There would have been the potential for them to lose their status, right? And it's equally in the 7th from the ascendant. Now, when we look at the 7th cusp, that's nakshatra, which is ruled by Ketu. And we've got somewhat of a compromise particular position because the moon is compromised. So the individual tried to push up against the resistance, but as Mula Nakshatra, or I should say the 7th cusp, is in Shastiamsa, to or of the mouth, right? So again, this individual, they were afraid of saying one thing, but they would have spoken out very forcefully on another level, perhaps in terms of trying to protect themselves or trying to protect their status, because they were somewhat afraid of what might have happened if they didn't, right? Okay, so they were afraid of what might have happened if they didn't. We can see this because when we look at it, we see the moon in the 10th from Ketu, and in the 7th from the ascendant. So that's the person's public face, so to speak, how the public sees them, their status, all of those things. So they would have spoken very forcefully to the public, or very forcefully to their spouse, or the relationship that they were in, or all of those things, in order to try to protect their situation. But all of the problem could have been more easily solved by not being afraid to speak something else that could have the situation from happening in the first place. Now, an interesting thing here, we've got Ketu conjuncting Mars, which rules the 10th. So we're seeing come into being here. And Mars rules the 5th. Now, the 5th house cusp nakshatra is in nakshatra. And the 5th cusp, the Shastiamsa deity for that is Amrita. The Amrita Shastiamsas, I find, for the most part, tend to relate to the individual rather taking advantage of their potential or not taking advantage of their potential, or having the pleasure of doing something in a good manner, having the pleasure of using their potential, right? Because if we understand, Amrita on one level is nectar, but it's also the nectar of immortality. Okay, so that 5th cusp nakshatra is in Magha, related to ancestors, right? So the person could have been proud on one level because Magha nakshatra tends to create that, but equally there was probably dharma bestowed upon them from their ancestors that they were supposed to fulfill. Part of that dharma was to protect the family status. Another part of that dharma was to walk the path of protecting others, and the individual likely found themselves, because of the debility of Mars, in a position where they were not able to do that. Okay, so then we take a look across. We're to Saturn, to Capricorn here. I want to try to finish this, and then you can see if any of you have questions, all right? And by the way, if you would like horoscope in my karmic analysis, I cover this. I also cover chart interpretation for the individual. I look at factors in the chart. In addition to that, I look for something called the Moksha Graha, which is the same technique for finding the Ishta Devata for an individual. And this gives you an idea of a good thorough idea of your karma, some of the things you need to do to resolve that in this lifetime. And with the focus of the Ishta Devata, that helps you to understand the deity that you need to focus on in order to help you with your karma. Or additionally, if you're looking at it as a planet and not as a deity, the path of that planet points you in the same direction. Okay, so when we have Rahu in Capricorn, Rahu in Capricorn's path is one because of coming out of Ketu in Cancer and having a lot of deep emotional concerns and worries, and those getting projected onto other people. The person has fears and they want to make sure that those fears don't come to pass. So they have this tendency to structure their world in such an external, like, I'm going to make sure that this is in place and that's in place and this is in place. I never have any problems with something coming along and hurting me because I'm a person due to this Ketu and Shravana, right? But that's a very path to maintain. And with everything being so external, allow the emotions to flow because the individuals are afraid of their emotions, right? That's a good way to understand it. So in terms of walking this particular path in the future, the individual, because basically Rahu here is in Ashlesha Nakshatra, and we're looking at Ashlesha Nakshatra with Mercury being Brashta, meaning fallen, right? So the person felt bad about something that they did from a previous lifetime. So feeling bad about something that they did from a previous lifetime, they then become very intensively focused on organizing their world so that the hardships that they encountered before don't happen again. Okay, now Saturn, who's Rahu's Rashi Lord, is Purishaka. With the Purishaka Shastiamshas, quite often the individual feels like dirt. Purishaka, a translation of that is rubble. And I found with these that the individual feels low. They feel like dirt because of something that they did in a previous lifetime, right? But equally, they tend to, because basically Saturn is strong in its own sign, the individual will also tend to have a lot of humility manner. They felt bad about something they did in a previous lifetime. So in this life, they're going to try to have a lot more humility. But because the Saturn is also in Shravana Nakshatra, ruled by the moon, which is Yaksha, a protector of the earth, and because Rahu's Nakshatra Lord Mercury is Brashta, again, this person is in a position of needing to guard treasures. So we need to understand that too, because when we were looking at the concept of status, that kind of fits in with that equation. The person's trying to guard their status, but equally on another level, they're supposed to guard the earth, guard land, and guard another person. But they have a difficult time manifesting it because the strength of the moon is compromised. And so then they begin to develop control mechanisms. And they, like we said, they try to structure their world in a certain way to make sure that they don't lose their sense of security. Why security? Because Saturn, Rahu's Lord, is in the fourth from the ascendant. Okay, the fourth Cusp Nakshatra and Shastiamsa. The fourth Cusp Shastiamsa deity is Devagni. Agni being obviously the fire deity. Your understanding of this, especially when there are some relation to this particular position, is the person is afraid of burning down, so to speak. Devagni, a good way to translate that, also fire, but you can think of the world burning down, right? It's a good way to understand it. And equally, Rahu is in the first from, I'm sorry, Saturn is in the first from Rahu. The first is Mrigashira Nakshatra with a bad Mars supporting it. So the person has a longing to do something, to be more protective, to do things better. That first Cusp Nakshatra is Mukya, to or of the mouth. So again, there's this concern with speaking something, but on one level, they feel that they really should. Okay? When we look at it, basically, Saturn equally is the first lord from Rahu and the second lord from Rahu. And some interesting things to look at this. The first Cusp nakshatra is Mrigashira. The second Cusp nakshatra is Punarvasu. Punarvasu by a home. And so a good way to understand this with the second being family is their to protect the family home or protect the family property are beginning to show and come into the equation because of what's said. But during Rahu Saturn dashas in this person's life, there can be some problems with property, potentially even some problems with family surfacing due to these particular factors. Something that they found security in can be taken away from them to a certain extent because Rahu Saturn tends to do that. It tends to take security away. Okay. You also have Rahu conjuncting the Sun here. When you have a Rahu Sun conjunction, quite often individuals have this ideal placed upon them at an early age of who they should be, what they should be in order to fulfill a specific purpose in their life, right? What they were supposed to be, and we're going to get to that here in a moment, but basically what ends up happening is the individual never gets to know themselves, so they tend to suffer from identity crises. And so whenever Rahu and Sun are active, they don't know which direction they should turn in because of an ideal that somebody else has kind of placed upon them that they find themselves having to live up to. Okay, so the Sun rules the 8th from Rahu, which is nakshatra. So this individual has a weak Sun, which is in Kala Shastiamsa. So they have a long time of difficulty due to being gentle-natured within themselves, because basically the 8th cusp is also Komala, which is gentle-natured. And so they, being gentle-natured and being sensitive in general, it puts them through times of hardship where they're uncertain of which direction they should turn in order to deal with that particular hardship. Okay. Now, in addition to that, the Sun is in Purva Palguni Nakshatra, meaning that this individual will try to do their best to work in harmony with themselves and equally in harmony with other people. But because Purva Palguni Nakshatra, due to Venus being in Chandrasha, Shastiamsa, the individual will try to project a state of dignity in order to deal with their situation, try to keep their composure, and try to organize their world in a manner so that they don't get hurt. And equally, to be fair to them, so that other people don't get hurt. But when you have Ketu and Rahu, on a certain level, you have an imbalance that tends to swing from one end of the spectrum. So the Ketu end of the spectrum is worried about others, worried that something. The Rahu end of the spectrum is, I'm going to organize my world so that, and I'm just going to block out my emotions and organize things this way, because that they did really bad things previously. They do that, the emotions get neglected. And so then they get pulled back to that area of concern again because things start going wrong. Rahu in Capricorn tends to bring periods into an individual's life where things get chaotic because they can't maintain the level of control that they want to over things. They just can't. And what they're needing to learn is a balance between emotional security inside of themselves and external security. You can organize your world in a certain way so that you can make sure nothing ever happens, right? But you can't control it. You can't. And so something inevitably will happen, make things get out of control, create difficult situations that force you to go into your emotions so that you confront those emotions so that you become more emotionally secure. So the idea is to not swing from one end of the spectrum to the other, but instead to find the balance. That's what this individual is needing to establish. Now, I kind of had to speed my way through that. I hope that that was something that everybody at least slightly understood. And get out, and let's see if we have any particular questions in regards to this. And let's see if we have questions here too. So if anybody has questions, general questions, if you have questions about the chart, I can kind of look at that. But this is a good way to incorporate all these factors into a consultation. Quite often with the Shastiamsa deities, people tend to look at those as just showing whether a planet is going to function in a benefic manner or in a malefic manner. And you can do that, but there's a lot of disagreement over which Shastiamshas are Shubha and which ones are Krura. So which ones are gentle and which ones are cruel. So it's a little difficult in that regard. But if you're good with understanding symbolism in association with the deities, you can also incorporate that symbolism into the consultation, right? It's good to explore it on your own. I wouldn't immediately go out and do this for other people because you don't want them to think something that may not necessarily be valid, right? But if you have been working with things like this for a while, if you've been working with things like this for a while, then it do that, and it's safer to do that. Okay, and I've done this for a lot of people who've had session therapy and who have past life memories and have found it to be fine. So if you'd like me to do this with your horoscope, you can get an astrological consultation with me through my website at AuthenticAstrology.com. That would be great. So Shastiamsa predicts karmic outcome or karmic potential, both. A little bit of both. Because the karmic potential can become karmic outcome, right? So it's both of those. Okay. But again, if you want to schedule a consultation with me, the karmic analysis takes that into consideration. But in addition to that, the nodal axis in the Arashi chart, self-related factors, the moksha graha, all of that stuff. So taking some general questions here for the next 5-10 minutes or so about anything that I've covered here today or anything else in general. Okay. What references should we read to understand about the Ishta Devatas? There's a particular technique to find the Ishta Devata. Maybe I'll share that at some point in the future. Go on it. And that's the same technique I use as well. So you can explore it there. All right. And basically, in terms of understanding the Ishta Devata, that's your chosen to take you to liberation. Okay, so let's see any other have here. And while that, we'll use another throat lozenge. Spiritual progress can, well, it can show the difficulty in the karma. Yeah, I would say the Vimshamsa chart, the D20, is better for spiritual progress, in my humble opinion, because other astrologers may use the D60 in different ways and read the spiritual progress there as well, right? But yeah, somebody's asking a good question. What is spiritual progress, right? I'm a strong believer that spiritual progress is more about self-acceptance than it is self-improvement, because unless you accept yourself, what can you really work on? Okay, there we go. Let's see if there are any other questions that people may have. Okay, let me see. Maybe I've missed some questions here. Okay. Right. Nothing that I'm seeing there. Let's see what else we've got that people are typing in. All houses denote spiritual growth of the soul, but they denote spirit in different areas of life, right? So that's the bit to understand. Okay. Life isn't just about one house being spiritual growth, different areas of life. So it's all about spiritual growth. Relationships, you can grow in terms of how you deal with resources in life, all of those things. Okay. So if you are more self-accepting, it means you have a nice, strong moon. Well, sometimes you can have a weak moon and still become self-accepting because you don't have any choice but to. Okay. So that's a good way to understand it. We'll take questions for a few more minutes if anybody has any. Okay. Now, I kind of gave you the quick version of all of that because I was concerned about fitting it all in and adding too many factors in. Is D60 your past life chart? D60 is much more than that. You can't just, if you get obsessed with past lives, you're going to miss the present, right? Which, their future and the past, it's all right now, in my opinion, right? Future's right now, past is right now. Okay, what's more important is the story. You can find the past life in the D60. You can also find the past life in the Rashi chart. You can also find a chart. I would say, that all three of those are important. And more importantly, the D60 is good for understanding the more deeply rooted karma. So somebody says Rahu and Ketu merge into one house in some division. The difference between Rahu and Ketu being separate or together in a house. Well, when they're in the same sign with each other, that means the focus is very intensively upon that Rashi. But if you keep in mind that Rahu and Ketu can never really conjunct each other, they're always going to be in different nakshatras. Their nakshatras are going to provide you a deeper understanding of how there is a difference between Ketu and Rahu, even though they are in the same Rashi. Okay, that's a simple answer to that. Another answer to that would take me probably an entire hour to talk about. Okay, so it's not that there's any difference between it, but you'll notice that Rahu and Ketu are together in the higher divisional charts, right? And most of those higher divisional charts are the more transcendent areas of life, such as spiritual progress, one's happiness, things along those lines, right? Okay. D9 and D60 differences. The Navamsha chart on many levels is about our purpose, things we find meaning in, what is the purpose meant to walk, what can we commit to. That's why I started in the Navamsha chart. The D60 is related to everything, right? You look at it for confirmation of everything, feeling of all the other Varga charts. How to see one's pending karma in the D60? Well, you have to look at the dasha periods you're going through and seeing what karma is coming to fruition through there. But you have to have a well-rectified Shastiamsa. If you're born in, let's see, born in lunar eclipse time, is there any connection with past life? I don't understand the reasoning behind that question. My apologies. Somebody's asking, when it comes to activation of certain places like D9, for example, are they always timed, or do a number of factors go into activation of certain planets? Different astrologers will tell you different things. Dashas and transits all have to be taken into consideration, but the transits are going to activate the things that are being brought to the surface by the dashas. Okay, if it's not being brought to the surface by the dasha, then the transit's going, so in other words, if you're having a transit or marriage, but you're not in a dasha period that supports, then it's not necessarily going to be marriage oriented. It can be some other factor, which is marriage, or some other seventh house factor, which is relationships, right? So it has to be brought to the surface by the dasha to fruit the karma of the individual. And also denotes karma. Another thing you can do when you're looking at Ketu and Rahu is to look at Saturn in terms of Rahu, because those are the areas of life that the individual is going to survive in or try to survive in through Rahu. And with Ketu, you look at Mars, because those are going to be the skills that the individual has. Their areas of expertise or lack of expertise, dependent on whether Mars or Saturn is strong or weak. Okay. I think we're going to stop there for today. Again, if you would like this type of analysis on your particular horoscope, you can visit my astrological services page at AuthenticAstrology.com. There will also be a link in the page down below when I get around to putting it there. Until next time, please do take the very, very, very best care of yourself. Thank you for coming and watching. Bye now.